again, everyone. I'm Mike Burnett. Welcome to the Real Squabble. Today, as we head toward Veterans Day, we're talking about veterans and families, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if there is any. But before we do, let me remind you to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Real Squabble. Welcome, guys. Sue is going to kick us off.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks. I love this topic. Obviously, it's my life. I think everybody here's life. So we hope that maybe a little bit of this will provide some insight to people who don't understand the military family life or military life in that way. And I guess I want to say that I got to thinking about how I wanted to approach this. And, Veterans Day is coming up. And we are all inundated and appreciative, but in my case, humbled. I'm sure you two both as well, by millions of people wanting to celebrate us for the hardships we have, endured, or in particular, the reunions are favorite stories in the media and all of that. And there's a lot of emphasis on the negative, on the hardship. So I kind of wanted to start this out by looking at the positives. Probably the conversation will take us in some other directions, but and I don't really want to start with the vets. I really kind of want to start with military spouses and then brats and then vets, because I think that military spouses don't always get the full appreciation they deserve. I have been a spouse, a military spouse. Certainly my mother was, my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, my daughter, but they've all been military spouses. So I have a certain amount of that. But I'm wondering, I think you guys both told me that your wives and Mike's mom were military spouses. What do you think are the pluses of being a military spouse, except assuming, of course, that's in addition to being married to you two wonderful gentlemen?
Yeah, well, my mom and my wife, I think they provided the military family continuity, right, through the years of moving to 10 different bases in 10 different countries. They brought the spirit to the home and the traditions, and and the love, the Christmas, the food, the family time at the table, all of that type of stuff that you had from a hometown, and which becomes even that much more important when you're traveling around, that you have these traditions year after year, whether you're stationed in Japan or Alaska or Germany, that you can continue to do to have that feeling of normalcy, if you will.
Yeah. Sheldon?
Well, when I look at it, I'm trying to think of what might be advantages for being a military spouse. But all that can really come to my mind is what I would refer to as the duty part of it, right? Now, military spouses help enrich the kids, especially during deployments. But I remember when I was a military child, my mom having to make do and do a lot of things on her own while my father's ship was at sea, right?
Yeah.
And then while I was deployed, I remember all the things that my wife had to do on her own with the boys and things like that while I was gone. So yeah, I guess if there are any advantages, it makes them stronger. It kind of builds on their ability to be independent, because after all, there might be times when we don't make it back, or there might be times when
that's exactly what I was thinking. I remember my mom, I was young, I was probably first grade, but I remember when my dad went to Vietnam, and my mom, there was never any expectation in the early mid 60s that women were going to go work, right? Or be out. And certainly, I mean, their job was to be at home and raise the kids. And she had 3 young kids.
Right.
I mean, I was the oldest at 6. But I remember that she went out and got a job, and figured it out and had this skill set from then on that she never would have expected to have, nor did my dad ever expect that she would have that skill set. When he came back, it was a bit of an adjustment because he left sort of that domestic life. And then what he found was, the women's liberation movement had suddenly taken over his mind. It wasn't, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it gave her that exact independence, Sheldon, that you're talking about, that she never would have expected.
If your family was in one place, like perhaps your mother was while your dad was in Vietnam, that could be a more positive thing probably for your mother. But on the flip side, some of the struggles for military spouses and wives through the years has been that they've given up their careers. Or they've gone from being a dental assistant to an educational assistant to working at the bank,
selling shoes,
to helping with the Girl Scouts, to doing everything. And they have this resume that could look like a phone book, right? And they come back and they wonder, what can they do, right? After a military career, what can they do? How can they get plugged in?
Yeah.
And I've told my wife, because she's finishing up a degree in counseling, and I told her, and she knows it too, that her military life with me and traveling really made her the perfect person at the perfect age to be in counseling, right? She has vast knowledge of encountering people and circumstances around the world that, that's what you've got to put in your resume. You've got to not sell all the jobs you did, but the vast amount of experience,
the skill set.
You have, and that comes from being a military brat and a spouse. We have these unique skill sets of coming in and adjusting and being innovative and thinking on our feet and figuring out things.
Well, the other thing that I thought about, go ahead, Sheldon.
I just wanted to say, and that kind of brings to mind another skill set that the military spouse has, and that is, you talk about counseling, but every military spouse is a social worker. And I say that because they develop these networks where they share, things that kids can get involved with. They share, places where you can get food for cheap. Just all kinds of stuff goes back and forth through these military spouse networks.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, and certainly even now, social media exponentially improved that ability. I mean, I've been out of it now for a couple decades. And when all of this has happened, but that network existed really well established long before the internet. That kind of networking thing happened really efficiently in every way. If you got orders to some foreign country, somebody's wife was writing you a letter saying, hey, what do you need to know? Tell me what age your kids are. Oh, you're going to want to be in this housing area. Oh, well, we know we'll need to get you this because your stuff won't arrive in time. Right. I mean, that network, you had a friend before you got there.
Yes, you did. You did. You had people meeting you at the airport.
Yeah.
We call a host of sorts, right? At least one host family that would take you if you were in Japan or Germany or Japan or Korea or wherever you were, that would take you to help you find a car, to find a house.
Yeah.
I remember back in the 70s helping us find heaters to put in our house way out on the economy. Right. To figure out, okay, how do you buy potatoes in a German market? What's the word for potato? My wife learned, the names of vegetables in Japan and Germany and Italy, and could go shopping at the markets.
Right. Well, there's, that's another thing though that I had really thought about, and I really would like your input because from a woman's perspective, it might be different. But I feel like the good thing that happens for military spouses in most cases is it really strengthens the relationship between the couple. The trust issues, the teamwork issues. I don't know that other people are tested early in their married lives the way military couples are tested in some way. And I mean, some break up. Obviously, I think the percentage is no higher in the military than anywhere else. But I think the ones that it works, I feel like it very much strengthens the couple.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because the thought that came to my mind is, yeah, I can think of some spouses on Fort Bragg who might differ, right? But but like you said, that's how it is in a lot of other works of life, or
Right.
walks of life.
Let's welcome Glenn to the show.
Hi, Glenn.
Hey,
We're
Glenn.
talking about military spouses and the pluses of being a military spouse.
Oh, is anybody here qualified?
I am.
Who is?
Okay.
But I think you might have had a military spouse. You might.
Yes, Mike and I both. Sheldon,
Right,
you too?
exactly, and Sheldon.
Mhm.
Well, Mike, do you think that that it strengthens the team, that it strengthens the couple?
It does. And you know what? Think back, if you go back in history from when we went across the United States before there were states and the cavalry went out to the forts, right? They'd have that same atmosphere where they would show up and families would take care of families, and you would be there and you would be on your own with your husband and your wife and your children. And you were that nuclear family that relied heavily on each other for education and food and friendship and spirituality and everything else. And when you go overseas, and this group is a prime representative of that, because we all became better friends, probably because we were in a microcosm of America, or we were, Glenn and I were, up on the North Sea, away from, felt like we were on the North Pole, up in the northern part of Germany. You and I were in northern Italy, and, Sheldon and I bonded in Kandahar, in Afghanistan. So we looked for our own. We looked for friends. We looked for churches and synagogues to go to. We looked for fun things to do with our family, and our military friends became our family to a large degree, because we just had to count on each other more. I remember as a child in Germany, I still have fond memories, because we didn't have AFN television out in the villages. We had radio, which really drove me becoming a radio guy later, but we didn't have TV. So we sat down a lot out in this German village in the early 70s, popping popcorn, making Kool-Aid, playing Monopoly, and getting to know each other and laughing and having fun as a family. Whereas sometimes back here in the States, and nothing bad on that, but we get so invested just in our own family sometimes that we don't reach outside and extend and make other friends as much as I think we do in military community.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I was talking a little bit about spouses, but let's transition into military brats. And I know two of us are. Sheldon, you're a brat. Glenn, are you a brat?
No, but Johanna is. And Mike, you're a brat.
Yeah.
20 years of brat.
So again, Glenn, just to remind you, we're intentionally for the moment focusing on the positives, on the pluses. So what do you think the pluses are of being a military brat?
From an outsider looking in, I would say that it really helps you develop friendships quickly, because you're either going to be rotating out 3 years after you meet a new person, or they're going to be rotating out 3 years after.
What's worse is when they rotate in the middle.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those, so I think you see that you find people who are exceptionally good at new situations and not afraid to, or it completely caves your melon in and you become a recluse and a wallflower, and you just watch everything spin around you. I think it probably for the most part it strengthened Johanna's character of being able to fit in and see both sides of every issue kind of all the time, because you're always in the middle of that peacemaking, making new friends.
Yeah, it's being a military brat. And first of all, for those who are not familiar with the military, the term brat is an endearing term for those in the military. It doesn't mean that they're spoiled. Maybe
badge of honor.
Yeah, it's a badge of honor, really. And brats look for other brats. And it's because we have that commonality of things that we've gone through struggles of meeting new friends, going to a new school every 2 years, fighting your way up the food chain with the next bully at the new school, trying to show the next football team that you're better than the guy that's there now, or what you're skilled at in art or singing and showing up and competing. You learn to compete, but you also, us brats, we become so situationally aware. We show up and we see every red flag from 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, adaptability is high on my list of the top 3 things that,
Yeah, we see it coming from a mile away, and we learn to adapt. We become very astute at figuring out the situation, becoming a chameleon to some extent, learning to talk to different people, sometimes becoming very good negotiators and ambassadorial. And I know that this is a very sensitive, day and age that we live in now. But back in the day, a guy like me would show up at a new school and punch the biggest kid I could find in the nose and establish myself as I'm here. And that was just my way. It's like I don't have time to screw around, and I'm not going to be your patsy. Right.
Well, one of the advantages of being a military child, and you referenced it earlier about that, hey, you're going to be here 2-3 years and you're moving on. And that has its advantages, right? If I made a fool of myself at one school, hey, it's going to be all right because I get to start over, and then I'll get to start over again. But coming from another standpoint, and I look at, a black male who was born on the east side of San Antonio, Texas, and having had that opportunity to get out there and make all kinds of new friends. And had I stayed in San Antonio as a child, I mean, we moved back later on, but had I stayed there, I don't know if I would have had that same opportunity. And what that opportunity has enabled me to do is to be able to interact better with people of all different cultures. I remember in San
100%.
Diego, our Japanese neighbor used to bring over different Japanese foods, right? And that's just one example. You get exposed to all kinds of different people and cultures, but there is something that you always have in common, and that something is that your mom or your dad is, in the Army or the Navy. And as a Navy child, all the kids, their dads were going to go out on the ship from time to time, right? So we all had that commonality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a worldliness to brats, whether they are stationed overseas or not. It's experiential, right? I mean, the fact that I can speak in 4 different accents in this country, not counting other countries, because of where I live. If I am so, I automatically pick up whatever accent of any human anywhere near me. But if I'm anywhere near anybody from Mississippi, all of a sudden I'm from Mississippi because that's where I went to junior high school.
Oh,
I don't even know what my family accent is, which is not a horrible thing, but it's not just adaptable. But you know what you were talking about, and I guess I wanted to follow up on that, Sheldon. I have really experienced as an adult, well into my adulthood, as a mature adult, that we have a unique interaction with people of color, no matter what color it is. We were in these microcosms where it wasn't allowed to be a distinction. Rank, yes, which was economic, right? Or status, but not color. And I really have had very meaningful conversations with coworkers now that I live in Virginia in the South. And they're like, well, of course it's all about color. I'm like, actually, I don't see it that way.
Right.
I didn't grow up seeing it that way. As a matter of fact, we were taught to not see it that way, which does not mean that there wasn't differentiations between us all in different bases and things like that. But particularly if you lived on a military base, there wasn't going to be a distinction for color. There were going to be officers living over here and enlisted people living over there.
Yeah,
there weren't going to be divisions of who was living in where.
There were probably pressures that the Black kids or other minorities felt that I didn't feel or sense.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
in the military communities, I remember and I lived in housing areas, back in as in the 60s and the 70s during the civil rights times, and I didn't feel it on base,
Right.
because quite honestly, on base, it was normal for a black man to be married to a white German woman, or to a lady from Thailand, or your neighbors upstairs to be from Spain or Korea. And you didn't think about it that much.
We just weren't in, it just wasn't pushed into us. I guess
You were invited over to play and build models with your friends, and it didn't matter. You went down their basement and painted model airplanes, regardless of what color they were. You had fun.
Ping pong, yeah.
You all played out on the playground. You played tag. You did things. You got into fights with each other, and that was just it.
Yeah.
At least that's how I honestly, it was actually very shocking for me. The reverse cultural, what do you call it? Culture shock.
Yeah.
When I was overseas in the 60s and the early 70s, I was like, had this rapport with guys like Sheldon. We were friends. We're running through the neighborhood with like I said, the guy under me was from Thailand. He was a big guy who beat me up one time, right? So that's another story I'll tell. But when I came back to the States, all of a sudden busing was going on, and I was being sent from one neighborhood to another. And then I had kids picking on me or calling me out or segregating me because I was white. And it was a shock to me because I was so used to interacting with everybody. And when I came back to intermediate school in Newport News, Virginia, and I had, a small gang of guys kind of encircle me and want to fight me because of my color, I was like, whoa, all right. They said, you want to run? I remember distinctly because I didn't know what the word rumble was at the time. This guy with toothpicks in his mouth said, you want to rumble? And I'm like, no, thanks. I'm good. Right. And I walked away and they didn't chase me down. So it was all good, I guess.
I don't know. I do feel like military kids, here's something that's just an insider thing that I can almost always tell when I'm talking to somebody about navigating, right? I can navigate anywhere, anytime, anywhere. It wasn't my mother's skill set. And so my dad, from the time I was like 5 or 6, plopped me with the map.
Mm-hmm.
You crisscross the country every year to see grandparents a couple times a year, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Sooner or later, you're going to really have, I believe, a geographical awareness that just flat doesn't happen to people that don't move that much.
Yeah, we traveled with one of those map puzzles in the car where we were always putting it together and figuring out where the capitals were and all of that.
Yeah.
And it was common to have conversations about, we went up to Belgium today or over to France. It was like going to a different county. And that's why brats can sound a little more snooty.
Yeah.
Because it's because it's not bragging. It's just like, that was our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Mike, did you guys ever have CB radios in 2 cars if you're moving with 2 cars?
Breaker 19, This is a Virginia Wild Child, over.
Good times.
What were you going to say, Glenn?
I was going to say, I remember, I sit down at dinner and Johanna will say things like, it's a different thing when you grow up in the Dodds school system, where she says, for my British lit class, we went over to London. For my Spanish class, we went down to Spain. We went over to Berlin to see the Berlin, the museum over there in Berlin. She goes, I went skiing down in France as part of a high school trip.
Yep.
She says, it sounds so pretentious, like she was a privileged child.
Right.
But it's like you said, it's going to the other county. If you can take an hour trip and you're all of a sudden in a different country.
We walked from our school to the Roman ruins in Wiesbaden for history and for humanities.
Yeah.
If we walked, it was half a mile away.
Yeah. Right. Well, I have been to every major museum in Europe, probably.
Yeah.
And I've been to all the Shinto shrines in Japan and Korea and all over the place. I've taken in so much all over the world, England, France, and I've enjoyed it. And it's been a special blessing that I was able to participate in because I was stationed close to these places.
That worldliness, that experience level is light years. I know that I went to college early because I graduated a year early because my father was going to move, right? So I was 17 sitting in college, and I had already lived in foreign countries and been to more than half of the states, and and sitting there in college, and I was right in with the juniors and seniors who had already done 2 family trips over during the summer break or what. I mean, it was weird. But I was older. I think all of us, I think military brats are older because of that constant change, just in terms of maturity.
I'm a floater at parties.
Yeah.
And no matter, I like float from group to group. And it's like, no matter where they go, where are you from? Washington State? Oh, I lived in Walla Walla. You're from California? Oh, I live near San Diego. Oh, you're from Virginia? Well, it's like military brats like me. I lived in Michigan. I lived in Alaska. I lived in Japan. I lived everywhere for 2 minutes. Right?
Exactly.
and there's no subject you can bring up most likely that I can't, I can talk
Quick
art.
survey. How many schools did you go to, Glenn? Total.
Oh, shoot. Ask somebody else. I'll have to count them up because my dad worked for J.C. Penney's and we moved a lot. Like
Sheldon, how many?
Family.
How many schools
9.
did you go to, Sheldon?
9.
9.
Yeah, I'm probably close to, I don't know exactly, but I went to 3 high schools, 2 different intermediate schools, probably 5 different elementary schools, something like that.
Yeah, I went to 14 in 11 years. Glenn?
Wow.
I 6 in 12 years.
Wow.
13 schools in 11 years. So you talk about adaptability. Boom.
Well, and some kids adapt. I adapted well to that. Some kids don't adapt so well to that. And some of the difficult things, I think it probably turned me into a creative person because you would show up at one school would be behind, another school would be ahead, and you'd have to figure out where the gap was. And when I didn't know, I would just work on my comedy routine.
I think it kind of ended up, it ended up advantageous for me, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Yeah.
Senior year, I had already been accepted to college and already had my Army ROTC scholarship, right? And I failed math that second semester senior year, but I could have failed one more class and still graduated.
Well, 10th grade, I failed English because of the gap going from one high school to the other.
Yeah, I don't know how to cursive write because we were moving when they were teaching that, and you can't practice that in the car. We were also doing times tables, but you could practice that in the car. So I never learned really. I mean, I can sign my signature because I worked hard at it, but it's even a version of a print. I don't cursive write, which I guess now is not a skill anybody needs. So
can you read it?
I can read it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you can read in the car, right? But you just can't write inside those little blocky lines that they used to try to get you. You can't practice it.
I think
until we get hit by that EMP, and then everybody's going to be writing in cursive again.
There you go.
Well, thanks for bringing the show down.
All right, I want to move on to because I think we're all veterans. What's the pluses of being a veteran?
Well, I think there are a lot of we've experienced a lot of pain and suffering and things that have caused wounds internally and externally to ourselves and to our families with PTSD and issues like that. But we've been blessed in many ways to do the things that we've already talked about. But our service members, our veterans, they give up a lot. They give up that continuity with that hometown and the Christmases and seeing your grandparents all the time. They give up a lot of that. But there are some benefits now as a retiree. And
sure, that.
I joke around about it. Well, if I'm at Home Depot, I go, hey, do you guys have a military discount? Wherever I am, I go, you have a military discount? And they'll give me a military discount. And I'll go, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. That's my benefit from getting shot at a couple times.
Well, but Are you all, let me see, Sheldon, are you still involved in DOD or still involved in the government?
Well, still involved in the government, not DOD. But
And Glenn, are you?
No.
No. So I will say that when I left working for DOD, when I got out of the Air Force, and then I was a civilian wife, so I ended up being a civil servant. But what I didn't realize, and I think you might all agree with this, I had no idea until I started working outside the federal government, the skill set is astronomical. The leadership training that nobody else gets, like even from the beginning, the supervisory training, like you don't get rank without going to another supervisory school or a manager school or a leadership school. You just don't. You can't exist in that structure without learning constantly how to be a better boss.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. You don't even know it until you go work for somebody who's never been there, or work for some company, or even local government. They don't have that process in place. It's
you get the experience. You get the experience and the education, almost I would say at a master's level, just based on the leadership schools you go to.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
and I think it's the same for technology. I think that the constant. Listen, when I was in civil service, I was MWR, low on the totem pole priority for like new computers, right? We would get the cast-offs. Comm would have them first, and then operations would have them after that. And then it would eventually end up at MWR's desk. So I was nowhere near the top of the food chain for whatever Microsoft was or anybody else was putting out. But when I left, I had no idea that I was a computer expert. I mean, none. And then I walk into an organization that didn't have computers, and they got their first computers, and I could turn it on. They thought I was walking on water, and I wasn't even close to an expert. So I realized then that routine upgrade of whatever technology is doing, which I don't have now. Right. I had to go take a class on how to use the new this, that, or the other software. But that would have been automatic.
I've sensed that as well.
Yeah, I remember just all the cool stuff that we would get upgraded all the time at the radio station and the TV station. Always had the best stuff that was on the market. I mean, the reel-to-reel machines were just top of the line. The Ace editing cell. I mean, all this stuff is ancient now because I've been out for such a long time, but I know that the military always was rotating in the newest stuff. I remember standing doing press conferences and looking at CNN and Radio 1 and Bremen 1 next to me, and our stuff was way superior to theirs, and you know, here we are, the E4 specialist Wolf standing next to these other guys.
Well, for those listening who say, yeah, well, there goes my tax dollars, I hear you guys. This was money well spent for the guys who were in the infantry and fighting and flying and doing our wars. We were the fallback and the entertainment and news that was begun in World War II by Eisenhower, so that we could help the morale and keep people informed overseas, because we didn't always have all this technology that we have now. And even still, there's so much, you know, I mean, there's voices coming from every direction, so that you have this one voice with American Forces Radio that has a news channel that plays CNN and MSNBC and Fox and CBS and ABC. And they give a pretty fair balance of what is happening, so people around the world can hear it, and that they don't feel like the government is keeping something from them, right? So that was what three of us here did for a while anyway, and that Sheldon helped me support when we were in Afghanistan as a public affairs officer.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, but you're right, Mike, to point out that it's not your tax dollars being blown away, but that technology is the reason we now have drones.
Yes.
Right. Which means that some Air Force guys are sitting. I know the guy who teaches the class. I happen to have met him 30 years ago, but they're sitting in a class learning how to operate drones
remotely
with
way
virtual
remotely.
reality headsets, and it's wicked cool. And the point is, those guys, when they leave that job for however long, whether they stay in it short term or whether they retire, their technology skills for developing that kind of thing, applications to, I don't know, 360-degree cameras in wineries to help the winery sell stuff, right?
Yeah.
That technology skill set just flat doesn't exist so much in a lot of other places. You get
And-
that.
Yeah. And
You know.
don't we want that for our national defense? We do.
Well, yeah, of course we do.
Right.
Mhm.
We
So
do.
that's what we're talking about. That's what we're feeding. And we're headed into Veterans Day. And by the way, it is okay to say Happy Veterans Day.
Yes.
It's
Thank you
okay.
for pointing this out.
All right.
It's not good to say Happy Memorial Day.
You don't
Yeah,
say
yeah,
Happy
yeah.
Memorial Day, but
No Happy Memorial Day.
it is okay to say Happy Veterans Day, just like saying Merry Christmas. Okay. It's okay to do that. And we have a lot of great veterans who are in uniform, out of uniform, retired, served for a short period of time.
Can't fit into their uniform.
It's amazing. My uniform shrinks in the dark.
Can you guys fit in? No.
My
Oh,
hat.
Well, it all depends on what the word fit means.
I would be drummed out if I appeared in a muster in my uniform.
Well,
Speaking of that, I miss my I regret getting rid of my bucket hat. They don't make them anymore. I actually do have my blouse, but I don't know what happened. It got lost someplace in 7 million moves. There's another plus, whether you're a spouse or a brat or a vet.
Yeah.
Boy, do we know how to move. No kidding.
And
We know how to clean
shed
closets out.
extraneous stuff.
And clean. We know how to clean.
Oh,
We know how
that's
to move and clean.
They used to be called GI parties. So if anyone asks you to have a GI party, that means they're inviting you over to help scrub their house down, because your houses had to be inspected, your ovens had to be scrubbed out, everything had to be clean, and someone had to come over and go, and this would happen to people, and you didn't want it to happen, to go,
Right.
No, the oven is not quite clean enough. We will come back tomorrow. It's like, they were serious about it.
We're supposed to be on a plane tomorrow.
Right.
We have to come back this afternoon. Wait, let's go in the other room, look at the other room while we clean the oven now, because we can't wait for you to come back tomorrow.
And if you were like me, when you came into a new place, even if you came into a bee hut in Afghanistan, you like sprayed it down, man. And you got it as clean, because I wanted it to be, I didn't know what the last person did.
Right.
I wanted it to be clean, right?
Yeah.
I came in, even in my hut in Afghanistan, in one of them, I lived in 3 or 4 different places in Afghanistan, but in one of them, I came in like with buckets of scalding hot soapy water and just threw them all over the walls. Because, you come in and it's like going into, a brand new hotel every night. It's like, okay, I'd rather just have it. I'd rather clean it and bring my own sheets.
Yeah. That's why a lot of times going to these different places, it was a pain to bring it with me, but I brought my sleeping bag, because you just never know.
Well, when we were in Afghanistan, I lived in some dirty places, but I always traveled with clean sheets in my backpack and my own pillow. And I would try to find a hot shower so that I could get at least, you couldn't always, sometimes you had to sleep in some bad places, but if I could, I would find, a rickety old, Afghan mattress somewhere and try to make it comfortable for myself to be clean.
Show of hands, who can sleep anywhere?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I used to be able to until I had to start using a CPAP.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no, I mean, I can sleep sitting on the back of a motorcycle.
Yeah.
I could sleep in planes, on the floor, going sideways, strapped in with 42 different straps. I could sleep anywhere.
I've taken naps and had dinner under tables when we were under threat of attack. So, after that, almost anything else is pretty easy.
But this is a skill set.
It is, You learn that, there comes a time in life where you go, you know what? You said your prayers, you've done everything you can physically to take care of yourself and people around you. And I've done that with people where I've been overseas in like Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever, and sat down with some young people and started talking to them. It's like, hey, where are you from? What's going on? Try to relax them. It's like the next thing that happens is going to be totally something you have no control over. Right. So that's kind of how I did it. I was like, you know what? I need to sleep. I'm hungry, and I'm going to do those normal things. For service members who experience levels of PTSD, and I think Sheldon and I both have experienced some levels of PTSD after we came back, there's this residual wake of anxiety and problems that don't hit you until after the fact, right? That don't, when you're in the battle, when you're in the midst of doing something, say, even if you're like in a car accident or here in the States, when you're in the midst of something happening, you're not thinking maybe so much about it. You're thinking about fixing, helping someone, doing something. It's after the fact. You come back home and you settle down, you go like, wow. You start to process what it was that you experienced. And consciously, it starts coming subconsciously more to the forefront. And all the good things are wonderful about what the military gets to experience with travel and education and experience. But they, like as we said, they give up family, they give up friends a lot, moving around.
A lot.
And they have family times with people, and physical and emotional scars that they get from times of battle. And that's why, and I know this show isn't about that, but it is about veterans. And I've never heard a veteran ever say that he wanted war. Nobody like that has ever been.
That's right.
Especially no one like me or Sheldon. And I don't know about Glenn, what you were exposed to when you were in, but if you went to Bosnia or not. But if you've been exposed to that and you've seen elements of it, you know it's not a John Wayne movie, and you don't want that for the world. But you also realize that we do need to protect ourselves. We need to have a strong national defense, and we want to be the kinds of people that do the right thing for the right reasons. I'm altruistic enough to believe that. Even after having been 20 years as a brat and 26 years as a veteran of the United States Air Force. And I am still a DOD employee working with public affairs, working with the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, everybody, still taking care of a lot of the public affairs missions and American Forces Radio and television that we worked with. And I still see that zeal in our young service members. It's good to see.
Glenn, why'd you go in the military?
Sober up.
Okay. Sheldon?
Well, I was in JROTC in high school, and the summer between junior and senior year, my senior Army instructor, his name was Colonel John A. Milani. We were helping out, getting the classrooms ready for the next school year. And he said, well, what are you going to do after college? And I said, I don't know. And so he called me into his office, and before all was said and done, he had me, apply to colleges as well as the Army ROTC scholarship. So that's how it happened.
Mike, why did you go in?
The economy was bad, and I needed work. I had a young family, and I was struggling as a young disc jockey, working at a couple different radio stations. And even after I went in as an enlisted guy, as an E3 in American Forces Radio, and we got our first paycheck, we were like, wow, this is great. Regular paycheck. We had, more food in our cabinets than we'd ever had before. And we felt, as an E3 with a kid, all of a sudden I felt good about myself. Wow. That's how bad. And the thing is, I was almost a college graduate, but I couldn't get work. I'd had a child. I quit school in my senior year of college. And fortunately, going in, I got that footing with the military. I got that paycheck. I was capable of finishing up my bachelor's degree as an enlisted guy and getting a master's degree. that they paid, I think in my time, 75% of. And
Well, that's ultimately why I went in. I mean, I went in to get a skill that I could be self-sufficient, but I went in for the VA benefits, for the education benefits.
yeah,
Mostly the education benefit. And I have no argument at all about that. That's exactly why I went in. But it's interesting to me that none of us said this, but I think we all agree with this. There's a, and maybe it's because we were exposed as kids to that environment, that we were aware it was an option. But I think that veterans have, to a large degree, a sense of service. And I don't mean to serve, but I mean to serve the greater good. Like there is an altruistic reason why we put up with some of that, why we do that. It's not all economic. Certainly not. I mean, in many cases, young enlisted people are on food stamps now. So, that's a different conversation. But in general, there's more that drives military service than economics or getting sober in Glenn's case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, and I think there is a great deal of truth to that, Sue, because even today when I ask kids about, hey, why don't you join the military? Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to go to war, whatever the reason they might give. But and only one of my kids joined. My middle son's in the Air Force, at the good advice of good people, including a person who's now a singer who was an Air Force Security Forces veteran. I was my basic branch was military police, and so I was saying my son was about to sign up for military police in the Air Force, and so we had a talk with her. She said, "Whatever you do, don't become a cop." Right, because she was security forces, but a lot of young people, and it's kind of funny because especially now during this given time, and I don't want to sound like I'm against student loan forgiveness, right? But I do believe that for your loan to be forgiven, there's something that you should be willing to give back, right? And so there's a different kind of attitude. I would to sign up for these different programs that have a commitment attached to them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That time, there are a lot of services, a lot of countries have that little requirement of some service. Not only helps them financially and educationally, but I think it helps them with their personal character. And
absolutely.
Yeah, there's lots of movies and joking about the discipline that happens in boot camp or basic training, whatever they call it in different careers or different fields. There's no jokes about that, but that self-discipline will last you at least into your 60s. You're with it. And I don't just mean because now I still fold my underwear the same way. But in general, that determination and self-discipline doesn't go away.
And it served me well in life.
And
even after the military with what we do. And for those wanting to go into the service, you got to think that, the field is wide open, and it really depends on your desire. Because if you desire to be a cop, that's what you want. That's what you should do. You should do that. If you're a financial person, accounting, administrative, you're a journalist, broadcasting, or if you're a civil engineer with plumbing or electricity, electrical work,
the trades,
it is all there. Anything that you have in a hometown in America, even at the dining facilities now, they send a lot of the people working in the dining facilities, they send them to culinary art schools. Right. So this is a better, and I'm not getting any money for trying to be a recruiter here, but in my estimation, it's a better first step than trying to go get a low level job somewhere else where there are no benefits necessarily.
The benefits.
Because when you get out, you will run into, you will always have, what is it you want to call it? You always have something that you relate to with other people, regardless of what generation they're from. You always, whether it's a World War II vet, Vietnam, Korea,
I think you do. I don't think women vets do. I think that I can't walk into a number of veteran organizations even now and be welcome as a member.
Really,
there's that. I get offered all the time to join the auxiliary. I find that more than just a little expensive.
Well, I guess that's still a challenge of our society.
Yeah, I've got some good friends that really, it really grinds their gears when they go to Lowe's and park in the veteran parking spot and someone comes up and says, "Oh, was your husband in the military?" Oh, yeah, that's a bad one.
Yeah, I don't remember. I didn't look it up for this, but I want to say maybe 10% of the vets are women, or it's low. It's low. It's actually not that low in active duty, I think, as much anymore. It's still not super high, but it's nowhere near the percentage of the population. But yeah, well, it just depends on how they hit me, Sheldon, on one of those days. If they hit me wrong, they're going to hear an earful. And if they don't, I'm just going to go, okay, bye, peace out. I'm just
right.
But, so we don't end on a downer there.
Yeah.
I would say that the opportunities for women in the military are greater and greater now.
No question, they are great. They were greater when I went in 1979, and they've always been greater.
Right, and the advancement. I mean, if you even look in the universities across America, the women, there are more women in college now than men, and they're succeeding more with the STEM programs. So if you're in the areas of science, technology, engineering, or math, and you want to get ahead in the military, whether it be the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Space Force,
no, there's no question.
Then there are some great opportunities. I came in because of finances and the economy, but I came from a long military heritage, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, as we discussed before even coming on here. So I did come on for those reasons, but I'm extremely proud of my time as a brat and being in the service, and proud to have served, and I'm proud of our military today.
Hey, I wanted to ask real quick, has anybody used the VA benefits to buy a house?
Yes.
Yeah, it is one of the most special, incredible, valuable benefits that we get as veterans. And it could be the one, if you're a financially savvy person at all at 18 years old, it could be the one reason why you actually go into the military, so you can accelerate your ability to purchase a house, and especially in this economy,
no question,
where houses cost so darn much.
We would not have bought our first house if we had not had that down payment taken care of.
I would agree 100% with that.
And I especially appreciate that benefit, because some of my older relatives, it was denied to them during that particular time, when a lot of the suburban communities were popping up across America. And popping up with government subsidies. There are portions of the population that weren't eligible. So I'm especially thankful for that benefit, but not only the housing, right? So when I decided to go back to schooling at my master's, which, that's, I always said I'd never do it, but I did it. And the military paid for all but 2 classes. I got a scholarship for 1 class and paid for 1 class out of my pocket. But something I didn't know is, once you become 100% disabled, they'll pay for your spouse and children to go to school as well. And
my wife is using that now.
Absolutely. And if you live in the state of Virginia, and a lot of other states too, right? So also have a program where they will pay for your kids to go to school. And if your disability is related to combat, which mine is, after you've been a resident for 5 years, then they'll also get a stipend. So, I mean, there are a lot of, and if you go to state parks, right? I get half price camping, and I can get my car in the state parks for free in Virginia. So there are a lot of other benefits.
Lots of benefits like that.
Yeah.
Everything from free donuts to free veterans passes to national park.
Before you have your final question, Sue, can I ask one? Because I'm sort of curious, and I know people who are watching who are brats and maybe young military people going to new places and new bases. that are shy, or extroverts like me have no problem. Okay. But how when you guys went to a new base as a brat or as a service member, how did you connect? How did you connect with your school, or when you showed up, how did you find your first new girlfriend in elementary school, Sue, or, your buddy? You just go up and introduce yourself to people? Did you get involved in programs, or what did you do?
Yeah, I would say that it's maybe three different things. It's neighbors, right? Immediate adjacent neighbors, any kids in the neighborhood that instantly you're going to meet them. But it's usually some kind of a hobby or something. I was in
Buddy, come here.
I was in scouts, right? So right away you're going to meet other scouts, and then you're going to know somebody that also goes to your school, or they live in your neighborhood, and that kind of thing. So,
you were a Girl Scout or Brownie, or what were you?
Well, Brownies are Girl Scouts.
Well, okay.
I was all of the Girl Scouts. I got the equivalent of the Eagle Scout, and then when we lived in Europe, I was actually the president of the Transatlantic Boy Scout for Explorers.
Oh, cool.
Because Explorers was co-ed after, like, for high school level. I think it was 15 through 21. It was that. So yeah, so I was the president for all of Europe for the Explorers.
Only one time was I a Cub Scout in Walla Walla, Washington, in the 3rd grade.
Card-carrying Boy Scout.
Well, as kids, it's not so hard to form your networks, because it's either going to be somebody at school or it's going to be somebody in the neighborhood. And I know our first year and a half or so in San Diego, we lived in an apartment complex. And so these buildings is a garden style, and they're arranged around the playground. So guess what? We're going to meet kids on the playground, and we had a great time. We moved out to Murphy Canyon, where the Oster housing was. It was the kids on our street, right? Those were our friends. And I remember especially this kid named Billy Otto. And I'm going to relate back to something I said early on, as far as, people of different races. So, Billy Otto, he was a great friend. And the fact that I was Black didn't seem to matter very much at all. We had great times. And of course, our babysitter lived across the street. My mom's best friend lived down on the cul-de-sac. I mean, that's how those networks seem to have formed, at least from what I can recall.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn?
Yeah, I think, as a single soldier moving to, Bremerhaven, where Mike and I met, thinking about the group of friends that I had, first of all, it was your work employee colleagues. And then, as a journalist, as a radio broadcaster, you're going out in the community and meeting all of the people who are in charge of whatever, and the employees there. And so you end up, you just end up striking up friendships with different people in different, MWR, APHIS, places like that.
Yeah, I did it mostly through school. From the time elementary school on, I did it in summer football practice.
Yeah. So it's your hobbies or the things that interest you. I was a theater geek for all of high school and all the way through, I was part of Tops and Blue and things like that. So, I mean, you just, but shout out to Rosemary Arsenault, who I can't find because she was my best friend for 3 years. The only time I ever lived anywhere that long. And her mom was from Sevilla, Spain, and her dad was from Maine, and you move and she goes one way and you go the other, and all you have are your grandparents' addresses, right? Because you don't even know your new address yet when you move like that. And so for a few years, you try to send Christmas cards to grandma's address and see if it connects with them eventually. And I just lost Rosemary, so I can't find her.
Yeah. Yeah, you come into, a lot of us come into the new communities, and we sort of make strong bonds with the people that we in processed with.
Yeah.
Or you make them at some, like you said, I would be part of at Bremerhaven, where we were with Glenn. I would be part of the drama program there.
Yeah, the drama group.
We would travel around and put on some shows in northern Germany, and I was pretty involved with our church, and that was always a good place to or your any place, your synagogue or whatever it is that you do, you get on the base basketball team or softball, you've got to, and this is something I always tell my son because he's a little more super intelligent, but he's a little more introverted to himself. I say, ask people questions about themselves. People, I'm a talker, but when I talk because I come from a radio background and I don't like dead air. But, if I'm in a group of talkers or people that are shy, I like to ask them stuff, and I like to follow up on it. And genuinely, I'm curious. Where you're from? You're from Fredericksburg? Oh, well, you're really close to Chancellorsville, aren't you? You go down. I say, listen to what people say to you. Pick up on things that they do that are interesting to them, because that's the best way to win friends, to talk to them, to discover new people. And 9 times out of 10, people will talk for an hour about themselves and then call you a great conversationalist.
Well, I have one last question. And we're just going to go around, and we're going to start with Mike so that he doesn't get to monopolize the time here. There you go, Mike. Got it? So the question is one overwhelming memory, whether it's being a brat or a spouse, or whether it's being an active duty, a vet. One memory.
One memory, overwhelming memory?
Well, that just jumps right out at you. What's something that sticks with you?
I think just, as a 10-year-old landing in Germany during the winter, coming down the Autobahn and seeing the snow coming down. I've actually started writing a children's book where I'm incorporating some of my memories from that time. I just always keep remembering that warm, unique feeling of coming down the Autobahn from Frankfurt and nestling into a small German village of Alt-Tornbach in the early 70s. I loved that.
Sheldon.
Well, the thing that comes to mind right now is singing harmony to Mike on a song called The Long Black Train on the Kandahar Boardwalk.
Okay. I can just imagine.
It should have been
Glenn.
On a CD too.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Any Christmas market in Germany where you can have Glühwein and you can smell the fresh mandeln being roasted, and you're walking around and it's crispy and you can see your breath. The smell and the Gemütlichkeit of Germany is just that Christmas is so special. It's not in America. We don't have that. It's so sad.
Hey, my son is heading to Bremerhaven, Bremen next week, so he'll be there for part of a Christmas market.
Oh, that's so
cool. I would say mine is that there was never a holiday without a stranger at the table.
Oh, that's good.
There never was. There was never Easter or Thanksgiving or 4th of July or Christmas. Somebody got picked up by one of us, whether it's the kids or mom or dad brought some guys home from work. Anybody that didn't have a family to hang with for a holiday meal got brought into our table.
Yes.
Forever. And we continue that. We still do. I still look to see who needs, who's an orphan for Christmas or whatever, just bring them in. But certainly if you live in the San Antonio area, we have good friends that are down there, and that program, you can actually volunteer to take people, for Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner into your home. So, but anyway, there you go. That's our look at a little bit of insight on being veterans, spouses, and brats.
Yeah, local nationals would do that as well, as far as inviting into homes, and that was very popular in the military. Thanks, guys. It's always fun to hook back up with you guys. That concludes our show, folks. Please check us out on YouTube and tell us what you think about the Real Squabble. Suggest topics for us. We talk about, what do you want to say? Tough topics, real topics going on in the life, in the world. Fun things. I think during December, we're going to talk about some of the holiday ways that we celebrate the holidays. Please feel free to suggest topics. We've talked about reparations. That show may have gotten deleted. We might have to redo that in the future. Don't read anything into that. So just stay with us, like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you next time on The Real Squabble.
Cheers.